Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. His website, macbethmcleodgroup.com. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. It's nice to be on in 2021.
Hilliard, are we looking at the biggest bubble of all time in the stock market? And like all bubbles, it's eventually going to burst. The only question is how bad and when?
Yes, I think we are. We're looking at a tremendous bubble. In fact, the main way people judge it is by valuation in terms of earnings on the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 is the sort of the benchmark of the U.S. stock market, and they add up all the value of the stocks on the S&P 500, all 500 of them, and they divide the amount of earnings into it, and they come up with a number. There's different ways of doing it, so it's somewhere between 25 and 32 or something, depending on which average you use. But it's the only time it's been higher was in 1999, 2000, but that was there were some oddities there that mean that probably today it's higher. And then if you use other measures, like Warren Buffett's favorite measure, which is the ratio of stock valuation to GDP, so the ratio of the total stock valuation to the size of the economy, this is the highest it's ever been by quite a measure. It's way above 1929 and slightly ahead of 2000. So, but then the other measure is Jeremy Grantham, one of the most respected investment managers, points out. The other way of judging it is the amount of speculation. We're seeing speculation and euphoria and froth in the market that we really have almost never seen except for the 2000 dot-com bubble.
What is the consequence of this bubble bursting going to be, and how long would this last? Would it be like the big correction we had last March, or will it take longer to crawl back out of the hole?
So the Jeremy Grantham, who's the fellow that sort of made this big call a week ago or so, saying that this is going to be a bubble that bursts and it's going to be similar to 2000, pointed out that in 1999, 2000, the NASDAQ, of course, that's where a lot of the internet stocks were domiciled, it lost 82% over the subsequent 2 years. So the market peaked in March of 2000 and it bottomed in about December of 2002. So about 2.5 years, the NASDAQ dropped 82%. So to give you some idea, in March, the S&P 500 went down 35 to 37% in about 1 month. So it'll be way bigger than what happened in March of 2000. That was what you'd call a correction. If this stock market bubble bursts, or when it bursts, it'll be called a bear market. It'll be a substantial bear market.
We keep talking about economic recovery. That's some time off. Is the economic recovery going to happen during this, and can it happen if the market crashes 80%?
Great question. So this is one of the things that's really odd about the stock market bubble is it's happening in the middle of a very poor economy. So there has been a recovery in the economy to some degree, but it's quite a bit behind where it would normally be. So the drop in the economy because of COVID was much deeper than normal, and the recovery we haven't got anywhere near back to where we were. In the past, when you've had these stock market bubbles like 1929 and 1999, 2000, this usually happens when the economy is booming and everything's great in the economy. So this is very unusual, and it's going to take a long time for us to dig ourselves out of the economic hole. And if there's a crash in the stock market, then it'll be even longer, because the stock market, a lot of the people that are fueling the economy, is as mild as the recovery is, the people that are fueling it a little bit are the ones that have the big gains in the stock market. So it would compound, the two together would compound it. To give you some idea, the U.S. lost about 20 million jobs in the COVID last year, and it's only recovered about 12 million of the 20 million. So there's still a substantial number of jobs missing. Now in Canada, it's a little better. In Canada, we lost similar amount on a percentage basis, but we've recovered more, and that's primarily because of the wage subsidy the government pays people to keep people on the payroll, up to 75%. So, but still, there's all kinds of people that are still listed as employed, but are working fewer hours, getting paid less, and then there's a whole bunch of people that have left the workforce, and they're not counted as unemployed. They should be, but they're not.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration, with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, you say there's a craze for initial public offerings. Why are people trying to bail into the stock market now?
So we talked about the froth and the bubble and the euphoria in the stock market. So one of the things that happens is there's a bunch of private companies that are not listed on the stock market, and they maybe they've been around for 5 years, maybe they've been around for 5 months, who knows? But if they're in a sector that people want to get into, they'd like to go on the stock market. So what normally happens is you have to go through this long process of due diligence and legal justification and research, and then you present yourself to the stock exchange, and if you meet all the requirements, then you're listed on the stock exchange. And the way to get around that is to do what's called a SPAC, or SPAC, or Special Purpose Acquisition Corp. So what happens then is you get a corporation that's listed on the stock market, has some money in it, and that company buys the private company. So they never have to go through that process because they've already been listed on the stock exchange. So that's the hot sector right now, and they've been just booming. Like the minimum size is 600 million, and already there's been way more than they've ever had in the last few months. So it's a sign of speculation, because obviously if you buy into these SPACs, you don't even know what company they're going to buy. They can't tell you ahead of time what company they're going to buy. You give them the money, and then they go around looking for a company to buy. It's definitely a sign of speculative froth in the market.
There's hints that we may be headed for a federal election in Canada in the spring. How's that going to affect the economy?
Yeah, I don't think it would affect the economy that much. It's kind of interesting that the government there's all kinds of signs that they're getting ready to try and do an election. They just shuffled the cabinet this week, and there's been some other signs. They're a minority government, obviously, so they don't have a big margin, so they'd like to go at a time when they could win that majority. And so I think it's unrelated to the economy. I think they need the vaccine to roll out better. They need to be seen to be competent in that area, and they need the economy to be coming back. And they may not get all that if this second wave or third wave or whatever wave we're in now gets worse. It's pretty bad in Alberta and Ontario right now. they may have to put off their plans to try and call an election.
If the Conservatives want to win the next election, do people have to stop asking who is Mr. O'Toole?
Well, he did. There's a big debate now. Is he allegedly did an interview, although he's claiming it wasn't an interview with Rebel Media, and of course Rebel Media now is famous for being associated with the Proud Boys in the U.S. because one of the founders of the Proud Boys in the U.S. Is a Canadian who used to be associated with Rebel Media. So Aaron O'Toole is in hot water because he did a so-called interview, but he claims it was just an exchange of emails, so it wasn't really a genuine interview.
So the reason I called him Mr. O'Toole is momentarily I forgot his first name. So I mean, who is this guy? And Peter MacKay was pretty famous. I liked him because he had one of the funniest lines I've ever heard from a politician. After Belinda Stronach, his girlfriend, switched over to the Liberals, he dumped her as a girlfriend and allegedly called her some name, and he said, "I never called her a dog. Dogs are loyal." So, and I have a pretty wicked sense of humor as well, and so I appreciate that. I don't know, is Aaron O'Toole, does he say anything funny that might gain him popularity? And apparently he's younger than Justin Trudeau, but he looks 10 years older.
Oh, that's amazing. If he's younger than Justin Trudeau, that is surprising. Because I thought,
Jagmeet Singh is younger. Now, I mean, Justin's getting up there.
Well, it's going to be interesting because that's probably one of the reasons why they want to call an election early is because they've got obviously they have a minority, but they realize the opposition is not well known yet and doesn't have the name recognition, and probably they could maybe get that majority government take advantage of the situation.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, is Bitcoin soaking up all the cash that normally would be flowing into gold in unsure times?
It's hard to tell with Bitcoin. Obviously, almost nobody's an expert, and I'm certainly not. But last time you and I talked, I think I said I gave an incorrect number. There's a $21 million limit on the number of Bitcoin that can be mined, and so far there's been about 18 million mined. So there's only 3 million left to discover. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to buy Bitcoin, but it's even harder to sell them. So. And the exchanges have a habit, some of them occasionally of losing your Bitcoin. So it's, they were touting it as a possible, medium of exchange, like cash or like bank deposits and that sort of thing. But the volatility going from 20,000 to 40,000 and then back down to 30,000 all in the space of about 10 days, there's no way that it can be used as a medium of exchange. It's way too volatile. So, I think there's a lot of money going into the froth in the stock market. Tesla, for example, hit $881 on Friday of last week. It's down today down to about 810 or something. That's I don't know exactly. I think it's probably a tenfold increase in the last 12 months. So there's lots of money going into things like that. And of course, now that Tesla's in the S&P 500, it affects that index quite a bit. It's the fifth largest company in the S&P 500. So, as you know, the S&P 500 is weighted by the size of the value of the stock. So the more expensive stocks like Tesla move the index more than a smaller company would. So it's very, very top heavy, and it'll move around. It'll become more volatile now than the Dow Jones, which is only 30 companies, which is very odd. But that's what happened in one trading day this week. For example, the S&P 500 moved much further down than the Dow Jones did on a percentage basis.
Looking at Tesla, it made Elon Musk the world's richest man, increasing his wealth tremendously in just the space of 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, he surpassed Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And of course, Amazon went public in 1996. And I forget the exact date that Tesla went public, but it was probably 2003 or 2004, maybe 2010. Actually, probably maybe 2000. The first Model S came out in 2012, and I bought my first one in 2016. So, yeah, it probably was more like 2010 that it went public. So, it's for it to surpass Amazon is absolutely mind-boggling. And of course, he's into a whole bunch of things. He even wants to send people to Mars, and of course that is called SpaceX, and that's not included in Tesla. So he's got a whole other enterprise, which is not listed on the stock market yet, which is doing space moves for NASA. He's planning a mission to Mars in a few years, and it's also putting up a low-cost, high-speed satellite internet connection, which will be available to people who live in a remote area. So there's a lot going on in his life, and it's not just Tesla.
Real estate in Vancouver, there's a shortage of single-family homes. Of course, the Lower Mainland's always probably suffered from that. People have found out that being confined to a 500 square foot condo is not all that pleasant during COVID work-at-home times. What's going on with Alberta real estate?
Well, Alberta real estate is trying to recover. Of course, Alberta's been much weaker than BC for the last 5 years because of the oil slump. But there's even in Alberta, there's a bit of a surge. But it's not that compared to what compared to a very poor market, it's slightly better. But I understand in Vancouver, outside of Vancouver, and outside of Toronto, the demand for single family homes is very strong. And you wonder, though, because other than new first-time buyers, everybody else has to sell something in order to buy something, right? Everybody owns a place. So if they're in a 500 square foot condo in Vancouver that they way overpaid, maybe they paid $800,000 for it, which is way too much, they would have to sell that in order to buy the single-family home. So it's a bit of a puzzle to me how people are able to bid on these out of town single family homes, which generally are more expensive than the condos, unless the bank's willing to finance them, assuming that their condo will sell in a fairly short period of time, and they'll have the temporarily owning two properties. So I think the government money that was handed out has probably fueled a lot of this speculation, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I would be very, very careful with any kind of a boom that's happening right now in real estate, because we've got this terrible economy, and the economy has not come back yet. It's still got a long ways to go to get back to where it was in December of 2019.
I've heard reports that trying to find a place to rent in small town or rural Alberta and BC is just about impossible. What's behind that?
Well, I mean, those towns don't have very many houses because there's not very many people there. So if you even get 100 people trying to move there, there's obviously not 100 houses sitting empty. It's not like in the big cities where developers will build extra supply ahead of demand. In those small towns, they generally wait till they have a buyer before they'll even build one house. So if even 100 people decide they all want to move to some small town in the interior of BC, that would create a massive shortage right immediately. So, and the question mark becomes, will people really be that happy? Obviously, work from home, you could, if you have a good internet connection, which is a fairly big if in some cases, you could live in some of these small towns, but you have to find a place to live. So, it's a crazy time. And of course, that implies that the demand for office space and for homes in the central part of Toronto, New York, London, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, the demand is going to be very weak, and we'll see. Certainly in New York and some other places, in Toronto, for example, the rents for small apartments have been plummeting because people just don't want to live there, and now that they don't need to live there for work, they can move out to where, if they can find a place to go to, they can live outside of the downtown core. So how far that trend will go is a really good question, and I think that's an area that definitely requires more research, because if that's a long-term trend, you can say that the office towers in places like Toronto and Calgary, where there's 125 cranes in Toronto and 34 cranes in Calgary, and the associated apartments that go with them, are in massive oversupply.
What's going to happen to all the small businesses in downtown cores that relied on office workers, the cafes, the coffee shops, the shoe stores, the little boutiques?
If you read about New York, or even in Edmonton, where some of my friends have places downtown, and you talk to them or you read about it, it's a disaster. Like, the people are closing, and they sort of hang on for a while because the landlord and or the government is willing to give them some help to get through the difficult time. But we're now a year into this thing. The first case of COVID was discovered in January last year, and a lot of these small businesses, they I don't think they'll see the benefit in trying to stay open much longer if things don't come back downtown. So and then the downtown core becomes a very unattractive place to be if you can't you can't get a lunch or a coffee or some of the other services. Why would you want to be there? So it's a really interesting thing. I think the small business people too probably would say, maybe they might also want to move out of the downtown core themselves. So they might be like these other people.
Hilliard, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim, and we're looking forward to a better 2021.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. You can find him on Twitter at HMacB. His website, MacBethMcLeodGroup.com. If you have any questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.